Thumbs up, got the thumbs up. Great. All right, everyone, welcome to the Asheville City Council's budget work session. And I'm going to turn it over to the city manager, Deborah Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to say thank you all for the number of work sessions that we have had and the kind of interaction and information and issues that have been raised. Today will be the last work session prior to the manager's recommended budget, which will occur late May. And we're going to provide you with a lot of information, give you some examples of budget requests, and hopefully portray to you the need, both in terms of what we are confronted with in terms of budget requests, as well as kind of the revenue that we have to meet those requests. So with that, I will turn it over to Tony. But one other thing, on the capital budget, we will be providing you with a little bit of an update of where we are, as well as describe some projects that we have underway, principally related to some of the sidewalk improvements. All right, Tony.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. Tony McDowell, Finance Director. Thank you all again for having us this afternoon. As we have with previous budget work sessions, you're going to be hearing from several of us today. I'm going to start things off. You'll also hear from Taylor Floyd, our budget manager, as well as Jay Dundas, our capital projects director. So just a quick overview of our presentation for today, and I'm going to do the first bullet there. I'm going to kind of give an overview of the budget process, kind of where we're at and where we're headed. Taylor's going to spend some time talking about some of the key investments that we are looking at as potentially bringing you all as part of the manager's recommended budget in May. Taylor's also going to give a brief update on the capital improvement plan, talk a little bit about the Memorial Stadium project funding, and then Jay Dundas is going to talk about some of our GO bond sidewalk projects. So as always, we like to start with some key takeaways from the presentation today. So as I mentioned, we'll be bringing you all the manager's recommended budget in about a month. And the recommendations that we will be bringing you all will be based on those bullet points that we've outlined there, available resources. And I'll be giving you all an update, positive update today on our available resources in the general fund and some additional capacity there. We'll also be talking we'll be bringing you recommendations based on the internal work that's been done so far during the budget process, and that really kicked off with the department director retreat back in December. Of course, we will be bringing you all a budget, and Taylor's going to go in depth with giving you all a preview of some of the things that we're looking at that align with council's priorities. And we're also going to be continuing, our recommendations will continue the information and utilize the information that was gathered in previous budget cycles, particularly around reimagining public safety and the community outreach that we did last year during the budget process. Another key takeaway from today, and we're going to talk a lot about salaries. As you all know, there's a lot of inflation in the labor market right now. And in this current labor market, to be a competitive employer is essential for service delivery, and paying employees at a competitive level is essential for recruitment and retention. And then, as always, third bullet is a reminder that even with the additional available resources that I'm going to be talking about, we still do have a limited capacity to do a lot of new things, including in the area of capital projects. So as always, we like to start with the timeline to kind of identify where we've been, where we're at, and where we're headed over the next few weeks. So we're here today, April 26th. This is our last scheduled budget work session with you all. We'll also be hanging around this evening to talk about fees and charges and bring those forward for you all's adoption tonight. Then we'll be back on May 24th with the manager's recommended budget. Public hearing would occur at the first meeting in June, and then budget adoption is scheduled for the second meeting in June. So just to highlight some of the things that we've covered at previous work sessions and at the council retreat, we had our first budget work session on February 22nd. We talked to you all at that point about our financial position primarily in the current year, and that we were having positive performance, particularly in the area of sales taxes. We also spent a great deal of time kind of diving into our capital improvement program, giving an overview of the capital planning and an update on some of our active capital projects. We followed that up at your retreat in March with some additional information on the economy, the local economy, the national economy, and the state economy, particularly talking about the impact of inflation, both in the labor market and in other areas such as fuel. We also gave you all an overview of the comprehensive facility assessment that is underway, which will be guiding our future investments in capital improvements. And then at our April 12th work session a couple weeks ago, we talked to you all about how the lingering impacts of the pandemic are continuing to create budget challenges for us. And we particularly highlighted those challenges in the areas of parking and transit. We also gave you all an overview and kind of a deep dive on our fund balance, looked at some trends, looked at some comparisons to other cities, and we talked to you all about our personnel budgeting and where we think we're headed this year with salary expenses. As I said, the council priorities are really the blueprint for how we develop the budget, and these are the priorities that you all identified at your retreat back in April. I won't read all of these, but they're familiar to everyone, and Taylor's going to go into more detail later about some of the things that we're looking to bring you all in the manager's recommended budget that align with these priorities. So just a quick update on the numbers. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're still seeing very positive revenue results. You all may remember at our first work session, we were looking at baseline revenue growth of somewhere in the neighborhood of $5.5 to $6.5 million for next year in our general fund. As we've continued to analyze numbers over the last few months and get in additional sales tax data, we've now been able to up that estimate. We're now looking at somewhere between $8 to $9.5 million in new resources for next year. And I've got some additional information coming up on the next slide about the changes that have led to that increase. The good news is on the expense side, when we came to you all a few months ago, we said we were looking at kind of a baseline budget increase of $5.5 to $6.5 million, and we still are looking at growth in expenses in the base budget, similar to what we indicated a few months ago. So on the revenue side, what's led to the additional revenue that we're identifying? So it's really two things. It's property tax-based growth and sales tax growth. We have, our original numbers assumed a 1.5% increase in property taxes for next year. We've upped that to 2.5%. We actually got our numbers this morning from Buncombe County that confirmed that our estimates are on track to meet that 2.5% estimate that we had done. So that will generate about $2.4 million in additional revenue next year. In addition, sales tax growth has continued over the last few months. We are looking at sales tax growth likely this year of somewhere around 13%. That's coming on top of growth of 16% from last fiscal year. We are projecting 7% growth for next fiscal year because we are expecting some slowdown, but that's going to generate about $6.3 million in additional revenue. And one thing to keep in mind is that the revenue numbers we're talking about right now do not include any of the fees that you all will be considering tonight. So I think with that is my part. Got the short part today. So if you have any questions on that, Taylor's going to kind of loop back around to the numbers once he's walked through some of the potential investments for next year. So if you all have particular questions about the numbers, happy to answer them now or wait till after Taylor has finished his presentation. Thank you all.
Did you talk about the general expense, the general fund expense summary?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I skipped over a slide.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was like, wow.
I thought it got hung up. So, okay, so yeah, so I did want to kind of go over, as I mentioned on the previous slide, we're still looking at baseline expenditure growth of about 5.9 to 6.3 million. So just to kind of give you all an idea of what some of those drivers are, and this is not an exhaustive list. This is really kind of an overview of some of the key things that we would want you to know. And We've highlighted many of these at our previous work sessions as well, including the increase in the state retirement system, which is about $500,000, our adjustment to APD's budget next year to account for the additional hiring that they're doing, the additional overtime expenses in fire that we talked about last time. All those are on the personnel side. On the operating side, we also have some increases kind of built into the budget. Each year, our contribution to capital goes up. We also have some land use incentive grants that council has approved that we're going to be budgeting for next year. That's about a $350,000 increase. Our fuel costs, based on the higher fuel prices, we think that's going to cost us about $340,000 in additional expense next year. And then we also have a recycling contract still continuing to go up, and that's about $100,000. So, sorry, I skipped that one.
Okay, thanks, I thought, wow, I fell asleep there for 30 or 40 seconds. So when you say, so these are basically what you're suggesting is these are kind of, they're in the bag. I mean, these are required, these are commitments, et cetera. But this does not include inflationary salary. So this does not include a cost of living. It doesn't even include a cost of living adjustment?
That's correct, and that's what Taylor's going to be covering during his section.
And so back on slide, I don't know what slide, it's not numbered here, but you had the general fund summary and you show the growth in baseline expenses, 5.9 to 6.3 million. I think what you're doing here is just showing us some examples of those drivers, which does not include salary, across the board salary increases, COLA, anything like that. We're going to get into that a little later in this presentation.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. You're saying, don't go spend all your surplus because it's getting.
Because there's no surplus.
It's getting eaten up and we haven't even talked about salary increases yet. Okay, so I hear you.
Yeah, we've got almost this identical slide in, I don't know, 5 or 10 slides, and we have salary costs in there, so you'll kind of see where we're at.
Okay.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
I've been studying up on budgeting and how we do this, and I was looking at our reserves for each enterprise fund at the 8% that we keep. And it occurred to me that when we look at a list like the previous slide that had the expense summary, really we need to add 8% of that as a one-time charge, right? Like, where do we quantify that in a budget process? Because if that's 3 million in increased personnel costs, somewhere we've got to increase our reserve something, general fund there, I guess. And then if it's in these other capital groups, then we have to increase at 8% as one time.
Yeah,
Are you following me?
I think I do. Yeah, I mean, so every year that the budget goes up, if the budget goes up, let's say 5% or 10%, then yeah, you also have to build in an assumption that your fund balance in each of the funds is going to go up by that same amount as well.
Which can be a fairly large number, but we don't
Can
really
be.
ever discuss it. Yeah. Just pointing that out. Okay.
Okay, thank you all.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Taylor Floyd, Budget Manager. As Tony said, I'm going to kind of go through some investments in the priorities that you all identified at your retreat earlier this year. We're going to start off actually going through some stuff that's in that base, some stuff that we've done and continue to do, will continue to do, that we think aligns with these priorities. So the first one, and as Tony kind of again mentioned, improving and expanding core services. We think that employee compensation and recruitment is a key part of doing that, of improving and expanding our core services. So just as a reminder of some of the stuff that we've done over the last few years, one was the implementation of a $31,200 annual minimum salary. I think that was 2 budget cycles ago, or actually I think that was off cycle that we made those adjustments. We implemented the class and compensation study recommendations, some of those with the budget adoption last year. And since then, we've made some additional adjustments to police and fire salaries, as well as some other places throughout, where we've identified some issues that needed to be rectified. So again, kind of on the employee compensation perspective, that's kind of things that we've already got baked in. So what we are looking at for next year is we think a rough estimate of around $3 million, and that is providing a 4% adjustment for employees that were hired before January 2022, and a 2.5% adjustment for folks hired in the current calendar year. And then we're still looking at some potential recruitment and retention incentives for staffing as well. And those recommendations are really based off of trying to continue to implement our class and compensation study that we had. And again, we're using that to inform how we try to stay competitive and retain our workforce. But we're trying to kind of balance that with the labor market that we're in right now, which is not something that our class and compensation study was really aware of, right? So things have changed quite a bit, I guess I would say, since that study was completed. So that's kind of, again, where that plan, the 4% and 2.5% came from.
Taylor, I just want to
Sure.
make sure I understood that. So the compensation study we didn't say the 4%, but we're acknowledging that more has changed and now we're suggesting the 4%. Okay.
Correct.
Could I also ask a clarifying question? We may be getting to this total compensation number, but when we're talking about living wage and our living wage policy, are we looking at that minimum being $17.30 an hour?
So I think hopefully that will be addressed here. So if you look at total compensation, again, right now our minimum non-exempt salary, so essentially like the lowest amount that we pay, or our lowest pay grade is $31,200. If you layer on the state retirement contribution, that the employer side, so the city makes a contribution of 12.1% for most employees. It's a little bit higher for police. Then the 401k, which is a 5% match, and our health benefits, which includes dental and life insurance. And again, that $10,000 is an estimate, and that can vary pretty dramatically based on whether someone's covering just themselves or a family, which plan options they choose, et cetera. But essentially that totals to right around $46,535. And we think that if you kind of take that $17.70, I believe, was the hourly wage that Just Economics said, and make that into an annual wage, that we are compliant with that policy.
Taylor, if you said the minimum cost instead of the average cost for healthcare, about what would that be? I mean, I think that might be, I'd like to just bounce that off of the 36,000.
I don't know what that would be off the top of my head. My guess is that it would be minimal.
At least $5,000.
Just looking back at
I
our
would
HR
think.
partners, see if they have
I was going
any
to
idea.
see if Larissa or Shannon had an answer.
Something's going on with are we having a sound
What?
problem? It's bad. Oh, your mic is
Oh,
not,
how about this?
well, your light's not on.
Yeah, it's just,
My light's not on,
It's
but
dim.
you can still hear me, right?
yeah, from this
Okay.
side, you can see a little bit.
So, I mean, what I might suggest is that we look at and just say, okay, so, like the minimum benefit that we provide to employees, I think might be a better number to put in. I still think it proves your point. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that, if I were kind of putting this together, that's probably what I would put in.
I'm just curious, so I guess what we're saying here, the slide is suggesting, is that we are saying we are surpassing Just Economics model at 1770, but I think what is confusing, if Just Economics were here, they may not agree, because I don't think they take into account retirement, and for them it's wage and health only. Just to clarify, because this may not equal certification by just economics, and I'm not sure if that's the goal here, but just to be clear, I don't think that's how they quantify
It's,
it.
it's not an apples to apples.
Yeah, just to be clear.
It would be helpful, and you're not the HR person, so you're just relying on the
Right,
HR
and we have their
information. but-
name
Yeah,
up
we
there,
do
just
have
economics is
HR
listed,
people
so
here.
I'm sensitive to that. Yeah.
It may be important to do an apples to apples rather than our way of calculating it. Just so everyone's on the same page.
Excuse me, Shannon or Larissa, can you hear me?
They're debating, they're back there debating.
Can you hear me? Harris Cherokee Center too. It's okay if we don't have the exact answer, but I think,
I'm going to do this. Good afternoon, Shannon Barrett, HR Director. We don't have the exact answer. It is not far from this if we're taking into account the employer provided portion of health insurance. And I think what I'm hearing the question is what the lowest amount would be based on, say, a single employee who has no family, who is, chosen one of the lower tiered health insurance plans. And I apologize, I can't give you that exact number, but we can get that.
and I guess if we just took salary, the 31,200 related to the annual of the just economic is 36,816, is that, because theirs is with or without benefits.
Right, they're gonna say it's 1770 without our line item for state retirement, 401K with health. So they would say that top salary number would need to be a minimum of 36,816.
Right, they would say $17.70 an hour, 52 weeks a year, 40 hours. So 31,200 is $15 an hour. And they wouldn't include the retirement, however, I find that valid. So health comes into play, and I pulled up their website to be sure. So without qualifying employer-provided health insurance, it's $17.30. So, and seven, yeah. Yeah. So health does matter. That lower number may matter.
Yeah.
To just economics, if certification is even the goal. I'm not sure that that's.
I do want to provide one
wanted to-
clarifier. They did not provide a separate number this year for with or without health. I think it's 1770 just straight up now, just one number.
Correct. So there's no subtraction for health insurance or other benefits anymore. And I think that's the moving in the direction of where our housing costs are, because you can't pay for housing with these benefits.
Well, yeah, we're looking at Just Economics website, and it's a little complicated, because they first say it's $17.70 an hour with or without health benefits, and then it says,
It's a
then-
previous year.
So basically,
rest
what
is
they're
about
saying
last year.
is health benefits really isn't a compensation.
And living wage employers have 1 year to come into compliance. That's why it's a little confusing. So if you're a living wage employer, the rate goes up, but you don't have to necessarily do it for 12 months. It's another confusing layer of their formula.
Okay, we've thoroughly mangled up your slide here.
That's totally
but but I think we're clear on what the differences are.
And I think it is a challenge to think about, the way that they calculate their number is very heavily based on housing prices. But I would also say that to say that we shouldn't take into account the retirement benefits that we provide is a little bit unfair, because that is a benefit, certainly, and there's a cost, a significant cost to those benefits.
And that if our goal is to be an employer of choice, benefits definitely matter. Salary matters, but also benefits as well. And so we look at the total compensation for our employees.
I'll appreciate that. And we have staffing issues, and the cost of housing is going up. And so I just have to advocate for, like, when I see the job listings that are open on our city website, I'm concerned that those rates are not going to mean that we're able to retain our staff. In addition to recruiting, retention of our city core services is important, and I know it matters to all of us.
Absolutely, and that's why we are trying to be competitive, and that's why you see a $3 million price tag with another bullet that says recruitment and retention incentives. So yeah, it's a battle right now.
So are we anticipating that a draft budget that we look at in May will be not in compliance with our living wage policy?
Well, I would hope, we're interrupting your presentation, but with good thoughts. But I think we're going to have to get into that discussion because we are talking about a finite amount of money. And I have similar concerns around us paying a living wage and also, knowing that the county is actually going to be implementing a COLA of 4.69%. And I don't know if they're doing raises on top of that. They may be. So, I mean, there's just a lot of need in terms of paying our employees a wage that they can survive on and also that is competitive so we can continue to retain and hire folks. But I know you've got some more to talk about in this presentation before we spend all the money in this one part.
So continuing on the core services, again, this one is a little bit hard to talk about what our ongoing investments are because I think we would say that all of the investments we make are primarily in improving and expanding our core services. So we just tried to give some examples of what some of those services are, from public safety to stormwater to street and sidewalk maintenance. We did want to call out a few things. One, a significant new asset that we'll kind of be adding into those that core service delivery is the Broadway Public Safety Station, which is under construction now. Obviously, capital funding is a big part of our core service delivery. And specifically, something that was included in last year's, or I should say this year's adopted budget, is some enhanced maintenance in high-use park facilities. So looking at equitable and affordable housing and stability, we have, the variety of tools that we use to try to, support affordable housing in the city, including the GEO bond, our housing trust fund, land use incentive grants, development fee rebates for affordable housing projects, management of federal money, the HOME program, which is dedicated towards affordable housing. And finally, we've made some significant investments with our previously in sheltering and housing with our American Rescue Plan funding, which kind of bleeds into the houselessness strategies a little bit. We are the continuum of care lead in our community. We're continuing to work with Buncombe County and Dogwood Health Trust, developing a sheltering plan. And then we also support some homelessness outreach that happens through Homeward Bound. Neighborhood resilience, again, one that has quite a few, touches quite a few of our services. But to give some specific examples, the neighborhood grant program that we established in the current budget, the work that Equity and Inclusion does directly with neighborhoods, including their racial healing mini grants, our neighborhood services group that was part of CAPE, the climate justice initiative that our Office of Sustainability undertook recently. And then kind of shifting on, kind of looking at the capital side, things like our neighborhood sidewalks program and our traffic calming program. And then another increase in the current budget that was improved with the current adopted budget was expanding evening and weekend hours at recreation centers. So reimagining public safety, we have the recently completed 911 consolidated operations with the county, efforts to enhance APD training and recruitment, funding body-worn and vehicle cameras, shifting noise ordinance and animal control enforcement to development services, and the expansion of the Office of Data and Performance. And again, most of that's been completed over the last 2 years. And then finally on reparations, the commission members have been appointed. Last year, towards the end of the fiscal year, you all set aside $2.1 million in reserve for reparations. And we don't have a lot of additional information on this one as far as new investments, primarily because we're awaiting the recommendations of the commission on short and long-term strategies. So now I'm going to shift into things that we are looking at, some new funding requests that we, again, think align with your priorities. And we tried to, again, this is not an all expansive, all-inclusive list of every single request that departments identified, but we just wanted to pull a few of these out, again, that we think align. Starting with some additional contracted services for APD so that they don't have to pull staff out of the field to do background checks as they're trying to recruit and hire new police officers. You know, obviously I have a special interest in the next one. No, but seriously, this is some software that would improve our, basically a web-based budget document so that's a little more user-friendly and not a giant PDF that's a little difficult to work your way through. And you know, probably isn't read by a wide number of people in our community. Code Purple sheltering, that's something that we've been funding over the last 2 years with federal grant money. So we're looking at trying to build that into our operating budget. Some GIS and asset management support. That's really about using GIS to better manage city assets. So that, again, think about that kind of the capital stuff that we do and being able to do more reporting on that and analysis on that. Some additional support in the homelessness in our Community and Economic Development Department. They've seen, those folks have been doing a ton of work and there's a lot more to be done there. Park maintenance relocation, so that would be moving a new lease to move the current park maintenance, which is at Hunt Hill, to another site. Street outreach, that would be in-housing some of that work that Homeward Bound is doing so that we have a city representative that can be out in the field supporting some of the homelessness encampment work.
And Taylor, I think you skipped over the HR software.
Sorry, I did. It's real small on the screen, so I guess I need to be looking over here. My apologies. So yeah, that is a new human resources information system, which will help us just better manage that information and facilitate, again, our recruitment efforts. All right, so traffic engineering and traffic signs and pavement markings, I'm going to kind of group those together. That's really just more support around all of those programs, traffic safety programs, more signs, replacing signs that are outdated, worn out, replacing pavement markings. So, you know, center lines, that kind of stuff throughout the city. And then finally, an urban forester, which would help us to better manage the tree canopy across the city.
I appreciate the examples of the funding requests. Are you looking for council input on these, or are you just sort of forecasting that we might see these, some of these, all of these in the manager's budget eventually? Okay.
So,
and some of these are one-time, and some of these will be recurring.
So these are all ongoing costs. There may be a slightly higher initial, investment to kind of stand up a program or expand a program. But these are all actually examples of ongoing items, and the total for this page is about $900,000.
And
And
Mayor,
so-
the next slide will be the ones
One
that
time.
could be one time.
Okay, so traffic signs and pavement markings you just want to build that as a recurring,
Correct.
for example, it'll be a fixed thing you spend the money on, but it would be recurring
So,
on new projects.
For
Okay.
example, some of that is done through a contract right now, and what we put towards that contract is not really competitive. We're not getting good bids because the dollar amount's so low, so we're kind of struggling to even spend the little money we're putting towards it currently.
Okay, so that helps me, and I assume the software, it's something we have to.
Yep, a
subscribe
license,
to. Yeah,
correct.
okay. And, some of these items, of course, council doesn't have a depth of knowledge because they're department requests and they're very specific to the department request. But we have received a request for an urban forester position for several years now, and I would be excited to see if we have an opportunity this year to begin to create that position and hire it, as well as the homeless specialist. This is coming from me. And then in planning, I'm looking at where on the list, it is small. We do need, I don't know if that's, what that is that
So
a,
Mayor, I met with
yeah, it's-
Todd a couple of days ago, and we'll be coming back with some information on planning.
okay, so GS and asset management, something different.
That
And- okay.
is in IT.
Okay.
So, the one priority area that I couldn't help but notice does not have any funding requests is reparations. So does that mean it won't be considered for funding in this budget?
Unless you all recommend that you want additional funding added, because there is funding from the hotel approval benefits table, and you, excuse me, have about 1.7 left over from your allocation last year.
It says 2.1.
Yeah, but that's minus the project manager.
So I'm
But
meaning
did-
like
I believe.
additional funding,
Yeah.
since it's one of the priorities.
I think we'll have to have a discussion about that as a
Right.
council in terms of what we want to do. Obviously, a lot of competing expenditures, but there's going to be room for us to have that discussion, I assume, towards the end of this.
Okay.
And you mentioned
Yeah,
that
because
slide
that
is,
was-
how much? I'm getting
900 and,
I think that was what we talked about.
I'm getting 2.5 from the total
originally.
slides, just to make sure I'm not getting crazy
Was-
numbers,
I think you gave us the total for this slide.
Correct.
which is 1.3. Yeah.
I thought, I'm just, we can just go back to this in a minute, but I thought that at the budget meeting last year, we talked about making reparations a part of the budget. I thought that was a part of the discussion. So that was a recommendation that I had made. So I don't know if,
$1,000,001.
For an ongoing,
yes, that was,
As in a line item for the budget.
It's similar, I think we had a discussion around, I don't think we
no, we
made a
didn't
final
decide.
decision,
Yeah,
but.
no, yeah.
Does, for example, does this budget include or anticipated to include our annual allocation for Affordable Housing Trust Fund? That was a decision made long ago that would always have this recurring line item. So that's what I assumed that discussion was around something like that.
So while we're having this conversation, I support a line item in the budget for reparations.
Yes, exactly. That's what I thought, for sure.
Right, so, yeah.
and without kind of a specific recommendation of where the funding would go to, I think there's a choice between the known and essentially the unknown, which, from the commission's perspective, their work hasn't
Yeah,
began.
But yeah, I realize that, but I think that we need to start having the city participation in the project that we actually, all were for. So we have to sort of show some type of effort on our parts to do what we need to do. So that was the reason we suggested recurring cost. Thank you.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be argumentative at all
Yes.
or defensive at all. But I also want us to think about that this is a community initiative, reparations is, so an expectation for the county, hopefully an expectation from the private sector as well.
Yeah.
So.
But you can never put too much money in it. Thanks.
Yeah,
So-
but we still have to balance the other needs as well.
So, will we, I realize that this, well, I don't know, but, will we have a little bit more depth of information about these various line items? Like just one thing, for example, like I, for one, don't really want to go into the business of street outreach. I feel like that would be, literally hiring somebody in-house that's their job. To me, it's like, we've got partners out in the community who can do that. And if we are willing to put this kind of money into it, then let's find, let's find partners to do that rather than creating a whole new a whole new job that we don't currently have. Because when
what is
it
the
says
job?
street, I'm sorry? He just said street outreach, literally for homeless people, like outreach. You know, they're on the street.
So-
Can you explain, or Nikki?
Yeah, I
explain
think I
that
can,
request?
I can give you a little bit of background on that. So we have been providing support to Homeward Bound for, I think this year is the third year to be doing some of this work. And I think one of the challenges that we've identified by having it outsourced is that there's not somebody that can be there if there is, for example, you know, we're going to a site where there's a homelessness encampment and we're trying to address those issues. There's no one there that can really speak as the city. And so I think that one of the challenges that's creating is that then that's creating a need for APD or, you know, someone else to perhaps come and be that voice of the city, if you will. So really the idea is that this will kind of help us alleviate some of those issues. So it in a way kind of aligns with some of the reimagining work. But I think that, and again, Nikki, if I'm speaking out of turn here, thank you. Correct me, but I think that's kind of the idea behind that specific request. And I will also say if there's any specific information that you all would like or more additional information about any of these, we're happy to provide that.
My only comment on that one would be if we are paying some, I wonder if there's any savings if we're paying for that service right now, but we're contracting for it. And then we bring it in-house, I assume there's some offset.
Not replacing.
It's-
They're having somebody in the.
No, but I mean, we pay for Homeward Bound right now for that service. So instead of contracting it out, we would be bringing it in-house. I'm just saying, I wonder if there's some offset in the cost.
Yeah, and it is in general, not just in this instance, but in most instances, more expensive for us to have.
Oh, no,
staffing
I
provided.
understand
But
that.
yes.
I understand that, but it's something we're paying for, it's a service we're paying for. And I did see the challenge we had several times, you know, during different situations where Homeward Bound wasn't available, or actually the fellow that was doing it for a while went to the VA, so they had some transition in their own staffing, and so I understand the challenge.
Yeah, and that the cost that's listed up here is the first year cost, so that's, again, kind of standing up that program. The annual ongoing cost would be less than that, but not by a significant margin.
So while we're
I-
talking about street outreach, sorry, Sage, you had your,
Go ahead, you can continue that thought, I'll come back.
I have questions about street outreach too, but not that we shouldn't do something. Regarding vacancies in public safety, we're not currently meeting our service obligations because we're planning for vacancies instead of planning to adapt. So I have two suggestions, and this is related to this one. One is piloting year one of our own ARPA fund application to reimagine transit safety. It's one of the highest scoring unfunded ARPA applications, tied with highest scores for equitable community impact. There is some capital in that application, so council would need to update on a 1 year versus a 2 year. And two, to set aside funds to partner with the county and community paramedicine to pilot 10 positions within the current vacancies that we have, adding to our public safety response team since the program is currently serving downtown. So I looked at the Asheville Downtown Association's survey, and 76% of respondents supported alternative responses to public safety. So if we had a chance, instead of doing street outreach, to partner with folks who can address the very specific needs of folks experiencing the opioid crisis and homelessness and mental health, I don't think this item has to necessarily be in this list, but I think we could fit it in our current vacancies, would be my suggestion.
In my conversations with the county regarding their community paramedic program, which they are funding and scaling up, they have said that what they anticipate is their community paramedic program would service downtown. So I don't know, we would want to have a discussion with them before we duplicate the effort. It's a great need, but I don't want to when we have such staffing challenges as it is, I wonder if it's realistic and also needed. I want to complement and partner with the county in what we're doing around reimagining public safety, but I don't know that we need to bring it in-house if they're already tripling their effort as it is.
So I'll clarify. Number one, we had a presentation at the Public Safety Committee, which I've requested to come to the full council so that all of us could look at what's happening. But 80% of the calls for community paramedicine are coming from downtown and West Asheville, so they're currently serving that. I'm suggesting that we make available ourselves as a partnership. So instead of planning for vacancies, we're planning to meet our service obligations.
Tell us more about what that would look like specifically.
It would look like us having a presentation at the council, inviting our partners at the county to talk about what could be done. For one, I know I've asked for that presentation to come to the full council, but if we had a better understanding of the data sets of what needs are already being met, then we would know what would be possible if we were to join in expanding funding instead of just planning for vacancies.
Just talking to our vice mayor about the presentation at Public Safety. It already
So
happened?
which presentation are you talking about? The one we had about community paramedics?
Correct.
And possibly helping them fund positions because they weren't fully
At the
staffed?
time, they were a pilot program. Now there's going to be an expansion. So I think before this council makes a decision around our budget and plans for vacancies, it would be wise for us to partner and see what the options are on the table. That's why I asked for that presentation to come to the full council, so we would have more information and be able to educate the public on the options for public safety response.
So I do have an idea kind of in that vein as well, because we have so many vacancies and the community is calling for alternative response. Instead of us putting all our money into a partnership where we have really not cleared out what governance looks like and what appropriate triage of our services will look like, why not bake it into our police department? Why not bring community responders so we can diversify our response to the community? And I know what you're saying. It seems like we're duplicating, that model would look like we're duplicating what the county is doing. But the county is going through some little issues right now because if everybody's reading the media, they have a shortage with their EMT workers. So they're having some strains here and we're actually funding something that might be overly strained. Why not build it into a co-responder model within our police department? It doesn't cost us any more money because we already allotted money for vacancies.
So I want to be, one thing real quick.
Sorry,
No,
I know
that's
this
fine.
is out your realm, but we just have to.
Is that like when we say we budgeted for vacancies, if we were to decide to do something else with those positions, that would be an added cost because budgeting for
I don't
vacancies
think
means
so, because
down.
here's my scenario. Okay, when we're thinking about the vacancies, I think we allotted 50. And I think we're allotting 50 with the idea that there is a spring BLET class and there's a fall BLET class. And each one of those classes, on average, will have about 25 per class. But we didn't talk about cadet attrition. We're going through a lot of attrition. So I don't think we're actually going to cover the full 50 with our traditional BLET class.
They do budget for. Well, and here's kind of a challenge for us because trying to micromanage the budget when I think you're going to tell us you already budget for some vacancy rate and all that stuff. So I think if what we want to do, I mean, we got off on this conversation because of street outreach, which would be born out of about a different department entirely. But I think if what we want to do is not duplicate, but complement.
Or expand.
Expand, whatever your word, yeah, around the community response model. That the county taking that on took a while. I mean, it was a long on-ramp and they piloted it. So I think we'd want to give general direction that we want to explore that and then have staff come back to us about what that looks like. I've studied some models in other cities that house it within the police department, but I've studied models that house it within the fire department.
Yeah.
So, you may come back, not you, you may come back to us and say, well, we've looked at it, we'd rather do it this way.
And another reason outside of our EMT service system being kind of under concern right now, I really think our community paramedics are going to be inundated with just the opioid crisis. I don't think they'll be able to answer other behavioral emergencies, domestic conflict. I think we probably need to be a little more self-serving in that area.
So this is why I suggested last year, and I'll repeat this year, that Durham froze 10 positions temporarily to signal to the staff the opportunity to adapt. And that way you don't have to get into the minutia and micromanage the budget so much as like make space to address the issue through the budget cycle.
But I think a good start for this conversation is to determine from APD and the city manager, what is the minimum staffing requirement for patrol? Because I think that's the area that we desperately need coverage. And then once we figure out what that minimum is, then maybe we can make a plan or make suggestions for what those other positions, filling those other positions will look like. We just need a different hiring objective.
Yeah, and again, we actually met with police in the last couple of weeks to make sure that we were taking into account both their natural attrition that they have, right? Folks leave the department, and then also their expected hiring, their training classes, and the attrition there too. So I think what we have budgeted right now is reflective of where they think they'll be over the course of the entire year. From a patrol operations perspective.
I don't want to jump to another conversation unless everyone's complete on this one. Okay. I have two things. I'm wondering, again, a little bit of a newbie here, are there ever expenses we cut or programs that seize? Is there a list anywhere of money being saved or trimmed? Is that not a thing in government? I mean, I'm joking, but also curious. Only partly joking. And then I'm wondering if there is something that could be provided to us before May. We mentioned earlier the ongoing transfer of funds from general fund to affordable housing, for example, the Housing Trust Fund, $500,000 a year. It would benefit me to see what a list of all those things are, these interdepartmental transfers. Maybe it's out there already and I haven't picked up on it. That would help me to see if there's any there that maybe don't need to happen this year and could be replaced with one of these others. And then I have a more of a broader request to my colleagues, and I emailed y'all about this today, but when I look at this slide and I look at for me personally, I feel like these are all very important things in our community, but the one on the far right seems to touch more lives than anyone in this community, than any of these things, affordable housing. And if you jump to the next slide real quick, one check. So missing middle housing study, something I think is very important, but it begs the question, what are we doing for affordable housing? So we're going to rally and finish our bond spending from 2017. But, you know, we keep talking about the county, and the county county's looking at an affordable housing bond, I believe $40 million and $30 million in land conservation. And in talking with them, it sounds like they may or may not increase taxes to do it. And if they do, it would be around $30 a year. And I'm wondering if we, as a council that have, you know, unanimously decided this is one of our top priorities.
Just clarify, Sage, when you say $30 a year per 100,000.
Thank you.
I mean, so.
$30 a year per 100,000?
Per 100,000.
Are you sure that's what they were saying? Because I thought that
think
Brownie was
that's
actually
probably
saying
your
that it
number.
was $30 a household. We could figure that out later. I guess what I'm getting at is there, it is, but I'm not
We had
gonna.
an estimate for our bond package, which was 72 million. If I recall, it was something like
74.
2.4 cents or somewhere in there.
Regardless of the
3.5.
numbers, I mean, that's not my point today. I guess I'm wondering if, understanding that this is a priority for us, if we might want to look at another affordable housing bond. It's election year, it could be on the ballot. And I'm wondering maybe if an approach to understanding if that's a good step would be to meet with the county over what they're doing around ongoing reparations funding and what they're going to do with this potential affordable housing bond. I mean, maybe it's something we all need to get in the same room together to discuss, because if we don't keep throwing money at affordable housing funds and programs, we are going to hit a wall, and we won't be able to do much except for rely on the private developer in any kind of land use incentive group grants or conditional zoning.
Sage,
things.
I'm going to push back on you. I mean, we have a pretty robust affordable housing program. I mean,
Oh,
not
yes.
only do we
I'm not-
have the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and incentives for private developers, we are in the middle of Klingman Hilliard has come online. We're going to do the old Matthews Ford site. We've purchased the Deaverview property. I mean, we've got a lot of projects pending. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
I'm
don't
not-
mistake, I'm not critiquing what we are doing. We are doing an enormous amount of wonderful things. I'm saying that there is still a need in the community that
No,
outweighs what we're
absolutely.
doing.
I'm just worried a little bit because you started out with,
Well, I'm wondering if we need to talk about a bond, because frankly,
Yeah,
those bonds that we
that's
did took years to get off the ground and activated and in the soils and in the plan. So, you know, adopting something in November doesn't mean we're writing checks in May. You know, it's a,
Well, and plus we have to determine if we have the capacity to
which of course
issue
would potentially include positions to
a
manage
bond,
it.
which we'd need to, since we have debt already for funds that have been approved and passed, we would need to have some analysis of whether we can, we have the capacity to issue.
So let me just be really broad. I would support inquiring into this, but I am just one councilwoman. And I'm just wondering if there's.
Let me just say, I appreciate where you're coming from, and I do think we need to have a recurring bond program for sure. We are a
Absolutely.
little bit at the 11th hour for a bond package for November. I remember the steps we had to take last time and what the county's already done to get this far. There's all these requirements to get us to it. So, I mean, I guess my threshold question would be, is this an exercise in futility because we don't even have the timing?
Well, but
and
they
then-
did the polling, right? So you're referring to the
No,
polling.
I'm talking
No.
about the required process to get it on the ballot.
It's too late.
I don't know. I do
No.
know that you need to have probably started it already, but I mean, it may be that it's possible.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just saying, I think we need to ask the question of the timing, the logistics, and the capacity, and then we would need to have the discussion around, okay, so if we hear what the capacity is, let's say it's $40 million, I don't know. Then we have the discussion around, okay, can we get it done in time? Can we have the required hearings? Is there, you know, and then you
Right.
get into the issue of
Can we afford it?
what the tax ramifications are and those sorts of
So,
things.
Sage, I appreciate you bringing this up, and I would love for us to get ready for a really strong affordability bond, packaging, housing, and transit with a dedicated funding stream for 2024. And I think two really important first steps for that are the missing middle housing study and transit feasibility study with the county. The second point I'll make is that's why I support a reparations line item in the budget, because if we just throw funding at housing, which is what I heard, but we're not addressing that housing is a key point in our reparations commission work, we really need to address the disparities and figure out why our housing policies and funding keep perpetuating disparities. So I think the reparations fund for me is a way to address the disparities in housing.
And I think that also, you know, economic development, because income drives affordability, and you've got to have that income in order to be able to afford. I also think that we shouldn't be ashamed at all at what the city is doing around the issue of affordable housing. And I know, Sage, you were not implying that at all, but I am jumping for joy that somebody else, another local entity, is in this game with us, finally. And so, yeah, the county ought to be doing more. They got more resources and capacity. And so I am hoping, I'm hoping Dogwood and private sector and anybody else, join us, please.
The only thing I can say is, like you said, I am glad that the county has joined us on this. And the county basically are actually building affordable units in the county. So, you know, they are adding to the supply that we need, and now they have additional resources. That's going to help us a lot, because people are moving out to those, you know, because I'm just really amazed at some of the homes they have now and the price points.
Well, yeah, I did want to just really quickly go back to this slide and just make note that with the exception of the affordable housing GeoBond, which is, you know, a set amount of money, all the rest of these are things that we are doing annually. So these aren't things that we have done. They are truly ongoing investments that we have made and will continue to make, or are planning to continue to make certainly in the next budget year. All right, so on to the second page. This is kind of I'll say, other category, not necessarily ongoing things. The first one there, some staffing for sanitation, just core service delivery, and some additional support for waste reduction. That would be ongoing, but we think that would be covered by an additional fee, assuming that fee increase is approved later this evening. We also had a request for some planning that would help support, it's actually a contract position, that would help us support planning for use of our opioid settlement money that we'll be getting. And that would actually be a grant funded by the Dogwood Health Trust. And then a few one-time items that are, again, mostly kind of plans or studies or things of that nature. Some additional work on comprehensive plan implementation, the missing middle housing study, and the disparity study, which we're due to do another one of those in the next fiscal year, and then some emergency management and continuity of operations planning, just to help us make sure that we're prepared for any disaster that may come our way.
So did you say on the opioid settlement planning, it would be a Dogwood grant?
Yes.
Okay, and which is great. I mean, I'm always willing to do that. However, we're going to get $56,000 a year. So, I mean, I would kind of question the need for a $190,000 grant to spend over, not much money. So I guess I would suggest that this one be rethought through, given the fact that our opioid monies has substantially been reduced. So, I'm almost thinking that those monies are so small now that it really wouldn't make sense to spend this kind of money on it.
But I'll suggest where we should use the money. We had a conversation about reparations and what our funding should be in perpetuity. And I know that most of us are sitting back waiting on the commission to give their short-term and long-term strategies. I think that's the obligation of the commission, but we have an obligation to figure out what the financial vehicles would look like to pay for reparations ahead of what they suggest. We know that it's coming, and we know that, like Councilwoman Kilgore said, there is no amount of money that can cover reparations. So I would say let's propose to Dogwood, if we can use the $190K, if agreed to by the council, to look at public and private financial vehicles to support reparations. Some cities call it a super fund.
And I don't know enough about the specifics of that grant and whether that would be within the bounds of the grant requirements.
And they like it.
I probably know just enough to be barely informed around this, but from what I understand, that specific grant, Dogwood had advertised a program for cities and counties that were going to receive opioid funds to participate in this specific planning grant. So I think those dollars are very much specific to the opioid settlement and what uses are framed within that settlement language, which I know they're pretty specific. So it may not be that, but I continue to look for partnerships with Dogwood, and so hearing that's something that perhaps we can explore, or Brenda can.
And yeah, I appreciate that, but this conversation always gives people of color just a little burn, because so much of a concerted governmental and community effort is going into resolving the epidemic on opioids. But when crack cocaine was a thing associated with blackness and black criminality, there was no relief. In fact, a lot of families were torn up. And I think that if they were going to repurpose the grant under those stipulations, then I think there's a case can be made about how this can be a reparative act concerning drug usage or substance use disorder.
I have a question about this. If we were to withdraw our grant request, would that make us more likely to receive a different kind of grant for the one my colleague is suggesting? Is that a conversation we could have with our partner?
I don't know. Good question, but I don't know.
Or we could look at this possibly, if we got the grant, and focus the planning efforts on impacts on Black and brown people in the community. So maybe we can just reorient the scope.
Yeah, and I think I like the reparations funding strategy. I think that'll have a greater and broader impact. And it'll kind of help us in our budget exercise with figuring out, how the funds should be spent. So, but,
Well, I mean, if this isn't if this grant's confined to this specific purpose, I hear what you're saying, but I mean, that doesn't mean we can't talk to Dogwood about supporting the commission and its work and identifying funds in perpetuity to be a source for reparations.
But I just want us to get ahead of it because once the commission was formed, to me, I got the feeling that it was just like, okay, now everybody's in, the waiting room, waiting on the commission to come forth with this funding, with these policies and recommendations. But I'm saying, like, let's figure out how to pay it forward just a little bit. So when those recommendations come out, then we won't be, running around trying to find money. We already have the money in place, or something substantial in place to have a quick response.
So I think that's actually, I'm hoping anyway, a good segue onto the next slide, which again is the one that Tony spoke to earlier with that added $3 million. And you can really see that if you kind of add that into that baseline expense number, the amount of flexibility we have to fund the items on this page, or any of the other items that have been discussed today is going to be pretty minimal. And I think that's where, as staff, we're always challenged to try to figure out how can we, again, best achieve the priorities that you all have laid out for us, given kind of the limited resources that we have. Councilmember Turner, I think earlier had a question that didn't get addressed about do we ever, reduce or cut programs? And I think the short answer to do we ever stop doing things is very infrequently. And I think that's primarily because most of what we do, someone or some group of folks are relying on those services. So it's usually really difficult to say, hey, we're going to stop providing this service. As far as do we ever see reductions in ongoing operating costs? Absolutely. And what we try to do with those is make sure that we're reallocating them to things that we need. And one of the challenges this year, again, with the rising inflation costs, we're seeing some pressure on department budgets in that way. But we could certainly provide some information on where we've seen some specific. I know just off the top of my head, one place was we've implemented a new telephone system that has a little bit of savings, but again, in general, in every budget cycle, those relatively small savings get eaten up by the kind of incremental growth in our costs. So I guess any questions on this or any other comments?
I just like a question, sort of was what Sage was talking about. Do the departments ever go through some type of radical evaluation and have different type scenarios as to how to actually maybe cut funding in different ways by just re-looking at projects that we have going, rather than just keep on with the same model, that maybe sometimes that we can actually switch to a better model that would work and cut costs? Is that something that you all do often?
We always encourage process enhancements, innovation, and I think we're always looking at how we can do it better, cheaper, and faster.
Okay, and the only reason I was asking that is because I've always been concerned whether or not our transit department is actually being utilized to its highest and best use. And I'm just wondering if a lot of costs that we may be incurring can actually be cut back. Like, I just noticed a lot of buses that basically are pretty much empty all the time. And I'm just really concerned about, do we have data that actually indicate ridership on different routes and things like that? We may need to look into smaller model buses for different routes. So I'm just talking about.
We did look at that. So, in the past, when we were down buses, we had 4 routes that could handle a smaller vehicle.
Okay.
But then we had fewer opportunities, to run vehicles as replacement if those are down. So then you have to essentially run 2 different fleets and have backups for 2 different types of vehicles. This is probably the biggest cost savings would be that feasibility study with the county to make sure if we're going to share resources that fleet sharing could be one of them.
Well, that may be something too, that because right now, I just don't see our transit as being, it's, to me, I don't think it's actually delivering what we expect it to deliver to the city. I think that the people that most could benefit from it is actually not working for them. I don't know, that's for me, just looking at the empty buses. I'm just, saying.
And yet we are cutting service on the highest ridership route in the city, and people are getting left behind. Looking at the data, the ridership, I will also say that during the pandemic is a difficult time to assess whether or not a core service like transit is effective. But I do appreciate what our transit staff is doing every day to make it as effective as possible. If we had been able to expand the evening service hours, that was one of the key reasons why we would have seen ridership go up, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to get to work if you can't get home on the bus. 30% of our routes end at or before 7:30. So changing that to be 10 p.m., including Klondike is a neighborhood that has bus service end early in the evening. If folks can get to and from work on the bus, that means more people can rely on it.
Two more broad questions. I'm just curious if we have any, I think we're going to see at some point potential applications to the Tpdf. I'm wondering if there's anything we might apply for that would affect some of our expenses or save us some money, and if there's anything to update there. And then I'm also curious, and I don't expect necessarily answers today, but I know we're going to talk about legislative agenda tonight, and I know Julie Mayfield with North Carolina Senate is putting forth a request to have a local transit tax. So on this one, I'm just wondering if magically that passed and was implemented, would it be a whole year till we saw that kind of revenue come in, or does it impact us right away? And for the transit folks in conversation down there, I know I've been talking with county commissioners about their interest in assisting us with transit funding. And I think there is some interest from some of the commissioners. And again, maybe we all just need to get in the same room and talk about it, because the couple I've spoke with do want to see increased ridership and frequency, but not necessarily increased routes. And they may, I mean, they're hiring more people, they're doing these bonds, maybe they can help with some transit costs while we're in a dire state.
So we have been embarking on conversations with the county about some type of consolidated transit concept, whether it's an authority or something like that. There's definitely interest in pursuing that. I think we need to get back with them in terms of next steps to pursue that, because long term there needs to be a funding solution to support transit and the enhancement of transit.
And that's the reason I suggest that we really look at those things before we consider increasing the taxes for the Asheville municipality. Sales use taxes for the residents.
And that's all sort of theoretical, because the legislature would have to allow for a referendum on a sales tax issue just for the municipality, which is not permitted. And the legislature, frankly, has shown no interest in doing that. And we're actually having challenges with the Department of Revenue, who says it's very difficult to parse out a sales tax revenue from a city versus a county, but whatever, that's another story. But that has been kind of a constant refrain as one of the reasons why it's impossible. But I think we have had historically conversations with the county commission about whether or not there would be interest in floating a 1/4-cent sales tax on a countywide basis, which is you can do by referendum. And the response has been, let's get together and really figure this out and come up with a plan. Because if before we go to the voters and say, please fund this enhancement, because it has to be It's not to displace current funding for current services. It has to be growth in services. So, you know, we need to be able to say to folks, what is that? What does it look like? And why would it matter to you? I mean, obviously, you need to know before you're voting on something what you're supporting. So, I mean, I think we have set the stage for a productive conversation and continuing productive conversation with the county about trying to explore transit solutions overall.
Can you clarify?
And a feasibility study.
That's great.
To determine
For sure.
what those uses would be and what the governance, I shouldn't say uses, what those routes would be, and the governance of a consolidated system. And, you know, once again, you know, our transit manager, we're in the process of filling that position. And hopefully, once that position is filled, we can move forward with probably getting a consultant to help look at the previous master plan for just the city of Asheville and build on it.
That's great. I want to make sure I heard something that you said, Esther, correctly. So if a sales tax was enacted and all those wonderful things, consolidation happened, it would have to be for new services? It couldn't actually? Wow, so that's a big difference, right?
Well, right. I mean, also, you know, and I just bring that up because that is why you need this planning. You need a planning tool for what that would provide. If it, you know, if it's just going to be on a citywide basis, that's one scenario, and that plan looks different than if it's going to be an extension into the county and it's going to be a countywide service. It also greatly impacts the revenue you draw from the sales tax, right? If it's just the city versus the whole county. So there's kind of a lot of pieces there before we go, you know,
Sure.
running to the commission and say, please put this on the
Well,
ballot.
I guess I
because
was thinking it could have been a cost savings, but not
No,
if it's a
it is
new
not a
venture.
cost savings.
So that's a
You-
big difference.
Yeah, you need to be
Well-
able to grow the service.
But it hopefully could help to fund the, you know, the
The
master plan.
master plan is in place and the.
Oh, sure,
Yeah, yeah.
because it does call for
Yeah.
expansion of
I mean,
services,
it
so
doesn't-
anything like that,
Yeah,
yeah.
it doesn't mean beyond the master plan. I mean,
Okay,
it
so this
could
one's
just
several
implement
years
that.
out, if possible. So I guess maybe then I'm curious, and I don't know when we're going to hear potential TPDF asks that might impact our budget planning. Is that before May or?
Yes.
Okay, great, because that does impact some of our stuff. Okay, that's
And-
all my questions.
Whoa, wait, really?
I know, really. Take it while you got it.
So good segue into the capital improvement plan. I think we could run through this fairly quickly. Just want to make a note, you know, we do plan over kind of a 5-year time horizon. This is the revenue sources that were, you know, from our budget document, which again, everyone reads cover to cover, from the current plan. And you can see there, you know, the cities generally of city money spending somewhere between 15 and 20-ish million dollars, closer to the 15 million annually, again, of city money. And we're spending that on a variety of things. And again, I'm not going to go through every single thing on those lists, but we kind of try to group them together into a few different categories just to make it a little bit easier to see what that list is. So looking at what we had planned for FY23 in this year's adopted budget was breaks out this way. And again, you can see the total of 18.41 million. One note that fleet and equipment looks very high. That is partially because of bus purchases, and those are partially grant funded. But this is kind of the starting place for our capital planning for this year. So we kind of start with what we had planned last year and try to make adjustments to that as appropriate. Some of the
So,
things.
Taylor, just,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you step back to, I'm looking, yeah, this page. When we say grants, is that basically when we get federal funding for mostly transit?
Yes, like for example, that 13 and change in 2024 or fiscal year 2024 is the funding for I messed that up. I'm not sure if that's state or federal funding, but for the Cox Avenue project.
Okay,
But yeah, typically it's grants from federal.
And it's mostly
It's
transportation. I mean, not every nickel, but, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I just got asked a question and I wanted to know whether
All right.
I was
Well,
correct.
glad we could answer it. So again, looking at, where we're likely to make some adjustments to this plan. One is Memorial Stadium. We have a slide on that in a minute. And these are examples, again, not exhaustive. Municipal building repairs, there are some significant needs at that building, and likely what that means is taking some of our facility maintenance money and kind of shifting it forward in the plan, so spending more of it earlier than we had originally sort of envisioned. We had a landslide that happened on Vance Gap Road, I think earlier this fiscal year. We've done used some of some I think contingency funding to do the figure out what that project is going to look like, but we'll put that in. We've have some additional bridge maintenance needs identified, some specifically stormwater and other needs at the municipal golf course and the Livingston Street project, which again, those are just things that we know we're going to be looking at and hoping to figure out how to fund. And again, will probably mean that what you end up seeing in the proposed budget will look slightly different from what what we had planned in the 5-year plan this year. Any questions about that?
I have one question after having toured the municipal golf course. Thank you to staff for facilitating that. Can the municipal golf course improvements be considered for TPDF funding asks?
They are, and we will be looking at that list and deciding whether or not we're good with it, but that is the proposal.
Yes, I just wanted to name it while it's here.
But is some piece of this, I know we have to match, but, okay, Chris isn't here, so we're not gonna be able to get into the weeds on this, I'm assuming. But is this some match that we have to do for the TPDF application? Yeah, all right.
Yes. So moving on to responding to one of the requests, I think, from our last budget work session about options for funding for Memorial Stadium. And Jade looks like he's ready to get up if there are any questions. But that first column there closest to the potential funding sources, I think, was the proposal that we presented, again, 2 weeks ago at the last work session. And then you can kind of see a step down in rescue plan funding from 2.5 to 1.5, and primarily kind of balancing that with some savings from completed projects. And then with no funding, you can see there's a deficit, and essentially what that would be is looking to, again, our capital planning in the current year and making some trade-offs and some things that we likely, would have done that would total somewhere close to that roughly $1.5 billion. And I would say, that savings from completed projects similarly, again, is, trade-off of, things that other things that we would be funding, but would not have the capacity to, if that money goes towards the Memorial Stadium project.
Well, I'll just weigh in. I'm still supportive of the first column to use 2.5 of the ARPA funds.
As am I.
Same.
Do you guys this is like when you just keep checking in with someone, like even though they told you they're like pretty good with the.
Well, but that's why we asked this question.
No, that's, okay, all right, yeah. Yeah, no, okay, I mean, I assume it's sort of a little bit 6 1/2 dozen or the other, right? You could sort of use but column one's what we blessed.
I just wanted to say thank you for providing options. I think in general, when we're only provided one option as a yes, no, it doesn't show us the pros and cons, the whole picture, the benefits, and I really appreciate it. I still support column 1, and I support more transparency so we can have shared responsibility and successes.
All right. I think we're getting close to the end of the pure budget section. just want to review the key takeaways. Again, our recommendations are based on a variety of factors, our primarily available resources, the work that we do internally throughout the budget process, the priorities that you all have laid out, and then the information that we've collected, including public input in prior budget processes. Also, the current labor market, again, trying to maintain our competitiveness as an employer is really, really important for us to be able to continue our existing service delivery. And as a result of, what we think that is going to cost, we think there's going to be limited capacity to fund new or expanded services, including additional capital projects. And again, so last budget work session here, and we will see you all later this evening for the fees and charges, and then next on May 24th for the proposed budget. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jade for an update on some GO bond projects. Sorry.
Thank you, Taylor. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Jade Dundas, Capital Projects Director. I promised to get through this pretty quick and get you a break in between sessions. This is essentially, as Taylor had mentioned, it's an update on our GO bond sidewalk work. We've had a lot of other projects in the GO bond transportation category. A lot of that work has been completed. We're nearing the completion of the Parks bond as well. Just really wanted to bring you up to speed on some of the sidewalk projects. I'll let you know that sidewalk projects, although their construction is relatively simple, getting them approved and authorized and through the community can be pretty complex. And so seeing some of these go towards the end of the bond cycle is not where we wanted to see them, but we do have a comfort level that we'll be able to deliver before the end of the bond. So this key takeaways of this section of the presentation are updating the projects, provide you with the scope explanation, and also a financial update, and then also review some of the challenges so you have a better understanding of how we're working with the community. At delivery timeframes, all of which will be under bid award by next summer, and that will allow us to have the funds encumbered in time for the bonds to be issued. And then review the work that has been completed and show you some of well, obviously, I don't have pictures of the work completed, but we will go over a list of those. So the first project that we're going to mention is Shiloh area improvements. We have had this out into the community. One thing that we learned is the project that was suggested in the bond presentation, when we went to the community to talk about that connection, that one block connection, they said, well, we have a plan. And the plan represented some sidewalks that they'd rather have seen built. And so through a couple of interactions with the community group out there, this project was identified as a connection that was identified years ago in a plan that they have for transportation in the area. It's Shiloh. It connects Shiloh Road to the mid block of Hampton. The Shiloh Community Garden is made available through this connection. And the only real challenge we have in here, because this is all built on city right-of-way, is that you see the buildings on the very left-hand side of that picture. It's pretty tight on Brooklyn Road there, and so but it's not a challenge that we can't overcome. But that will be a little bit of a pinch point. But this is when it's all said and done, this is a good project, and it'll be relatively easy for us to build. We'll have this under award the construction spring of 23, and it's about a $600,000 project. Vermont Avenue sidewalk. I think I'm missing a picture here. Okay, there we go. You see on the top is that this sidewalk is unlike Shiloh, the Shiloh area improvements. That's a brand new sidewalk. This one is a replacement of existing. This sidewalk is in bad shape. The picture on the top right gives you an indication of one section of sidewalk, and there are other sections that are similar condition to this. Challenges, the benefits are that we will improve pedestrian safety, and by replacing the deteriorated sidewalk, we really are at a one-for-one replacement on this project. Key challenges are they have a mature tree canopy along this roadway, and there's overwhelming support to try to preserve the tree canopy. That does put us in a situation of essentially having to replace in kind. We will make this an accessible sidewalk, but it is working with the community to really try to weigh those needs. That we aren't going to be able to preserve all of the trees. There are some that are not healthy, but that will be a continued communication with the community. We will have this one bid fall 2022, and then it's a $1.1 million project. And that is, again, just straight replacement and making it accessible, meet accessibility compliance requirements. Newhawk Creek Road is a project that was, when we had the bond approved, we didn't have enough funding for it through the original estimates. And so we went back out to the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and that was one of those grants that we talked about for transportation projects. We were able to leverage several $1 million against use our bonds for getting those grants. And we were able to, and as a result, we were able to increase the budget for this project and complete the nearly 1 mile of project in this area. Again, this is, as most sidewalks are, is an improvement for safety. There is connectivity to neighborhoods and schools and businesses in the area. The biggest challenges, like a lot of sidewalks that we have in Asheville, are the tight right-of-way. We have very little right-of-way outside of the existing roadway. This is a DOT road. There's an extra measure of review and authorization and coordination there. So we're certainly working through that with them and have been for years now. And they're also, the funds are passed through DOT as well. So that has typically is not a problem, but they had a budget pinch a couple of years ago, which kind of slowed things down for a little bit. This road in particular is steep slopes on both sides. And so there's another challenge there. We'll have retaining walls to do that, but this also increases the challenges that we have with homeowners because of the need for additional right-of-way. Again, we're far along in this process. The right-of-way acquisition is our big task right now, and this is a $3.3 million project. Similarly, I think one thing that if you put these on a map, you'd find out that these are really well distributed throughout Asheville, and so that's a good. I think that's a good sign of a really good planning effort. Johnston Boulevard, very, very similar to Newhawk Creek sidewalk. There are not the steep slopes, but we get the steep slopes issue taken care of when we add a railroad crossing, and that comes with its own set of challenges. It's again about a $3.3 million project. And it's on schedule to bid this fall as well. Airport Road, it's from Walmart to Hendersonville Road. This is a DOT road as well, heavy traffic DOT road. The project's going to be very similar to the sidewalk that we built on Hendersonville Road a couple of years ago. That required that we work at night. It's not something that we'll just bid that into the contract, and that will be reflected in all of the pricing and so forth. But it is something that is going to be an added challenge to this. This does do great. It improves connectivity through neighborhoods, but also a large the commercial area. It will have a continuous sidewalk from Hendersonville Road to I-26, and so this is a kind of a missing link here. There is going to be pedestrian improvements at the intersections of Walmart. If you've ever been down there in high traffic areas, that's kind of a little bit of a congested and busy intersections, 2 of them, and so this will improve the signalization there and the pedestrian safety aspects. Ontiora, a neighborhood sidewalk in the Oakley area. This is a rather long sidewalk. The constructability here is not very difficult because it is a relatively flat area. But it does have, again, the right-of-way challenges, ownership issues. We are working through this. This one should bid fairly in the spring or in the fall. But it completes the connectivity of the neighborhood to the recreation amenities that exist there, the library and so forth. This is a really good project, and again, this is also one that was additionally funded, and Johnston Boulevard with the additional MPO funding. Okay, so briefly went through what we're looking forward to. What we've got behind us is Fulton Street project. It was a one-block sidewalk. We were able to build that in the neighborhood. There are some additional retaining walls. Had a lot of community support there and a lot of community interaction. That project's been delivered as of last fall. It cost about $450,000. Haywood Street, here in front of us, was one project that we were able to actually build during the first year of the pandemic. And I think that we minimized the impact on the business owners. Not to say that it was completely eliminated. There was still some impact, but I think we were able to get through those fairly well. The price tag on this needs a little bit of explanation because we were also able to complete a major sewer replacement project. We worked with MSD in this project. I think this is a precedent for us moving forward. And they were able to replace a major piece of downtown infrastructure without having to do back-to-back projects. And so we essentially managed a project for them. And as a result, we got the sewer replacement, brand new paving out all the way through the curve here. And then also the sidewalk replacement, which was our part. And then also some water replacement as well. Hill Street was a small connection project up north of downtown here, connecting Riverside Drive to Overland, I think the name the street is. And that was a project we were able to get done fairly quickly in conjunction with another neighborhood sidewalk project on Bingham Road. And then, interestingly enough, between the time that the bonds were approved and about 2018, my dates aren't exact here, Gerber Road and Mills Gap were built by others. And so we were at the DOT, I believe, and they came along and did some improvements, and they crossed the railroad for us, which is a huge benefit to us. And they connected essentially you've got a continuous connection between Hendersonville Road and Sweeten Creek there. Gerber Road was an extension of a sidewalk from Hendersonville Road to the railroad tracks, but that was performed by the apartment developers. That's part of our code as well, is that if you're our development code ordinance, is that if you're developing a piece of property and you have frontage, then you're required to build the sidewalk or pay a fee in lieu of not building that sidewalk. So in this case, we had the developer build the sidewalk, and we were able to use the money to fund some other projects that were needed additional budget. So that's a short and quick summary of what we've got going and what's been done. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Sounds like your groups could just take vacation.
Not quite yet.
Yeah, you have a lot going on, so.
Not quite yet.
Yeah.
So thank you for this presentation and these updates. I noticed that the ongoing projects don't exactly match up with our dashboard website, but the finished ones seem to. And it's such a useful tool, just for public benefit. It's dashboards.asheville.nc.gov. I was able to find it really easily by just searching for bond dashboard Asheville, and it pops right in. But can we get some clarity on when those numbers will be updated on the dashboard?
Yes, we can do that. We certainly take the information we have from these presentations and our updated budget. So that's a different tool that we're using and get that information loaded in there. We have been a little bit slow about that because some of those numbers reflect the original budgets, and in order to try to not have that budget constantly creeping and try to resolve some confusion there. We've not been they may be out of date a little bit, so we can certainly get those updated fairly quickly.
So when I get questions in the community about when certain sidewalks will be addressed, something like this dashboard is so helpful. And I know in years past, I've seen a neighborhood sidewalk analysis that included cost, feasibility, the need for it to be addressed, the urgency, of course. But I know that we don't have that public facing right now. We also have the gap plan in process. So my suggestion would just be, once we get that gap plan rolled out, because that's coming to council soon, something like this, plugging it straight in so that folks have one place they can go to see where the project is, where it's at in the timeline, if it's meeting the budget, and the different phases is just brilliant. It's worth the work.
Thank you for recognizing that. And I would, sorry, I would
Yeah.
also mention that the financial, so the budget is certainly, that's hand entered, and that's on us. The actual, under contract and the amount spent is automatically updated through our financial management system. And so what you're seeing there is real-time, daily updates on what's being spent on those projects. I'm sorry, Mayor.
The other piece of it that I think is important for the public to understand and for us to understand is the funding mix. So you give us the total price of the projects, but some of them might be significantly funded through the state, through the MPO or something like that. Or, right, so I mean, it would be helpful to me to be able to explain that to folks, because, it's a significant, the price tag for these projects is significant. And I think it's, when people say, why do you have all these studies? Why do you have all these plans? Why do you need a consultant? I mean, and the answer is a lot of times we can't put ourselves in a position where we're eligible for that kind of funding unless we have these plans in place, or we're in the process of producing our own funds to be able to match. So I think it's just helpful for people to know how that gets all baked together.
Yeah, that's something we can work on, for sure.
Yeah, and Mayor, thank you for that as well, all of you all, your input, because this is exactly what we wanted to do with these updates on our capital projects, is get your feedback such that this isn't the first time that you're seeing these projects. And when you get emails, you can say, I remember that's in that slide presentation that we did at the budget work session. So this will be an ongoing relationship with council, whereby we're trying to provide you with as much information on capital projects as possible. So this is ongoing.
So you made me think of another thing that's kind of funny about the way we have stored our information. So you gave us an update about the GEO bond funded projects, but of course there's other projects that are not GEO fund. So a lot of times they'll say, that's it, you're not doing any more sidewalk projects than that? Well, yeah, we are, but they're, we parse it out by pot of money.
Funding.
And that's, I think the community obviously thinks about it as a blended situation. So I've always hoped we could have one clearinghouse for every single thing capital, but I know that's a challenge because of the way we handle it departmentally.
And the dashboard is an attempt at that. It might, hopefully, it may not be the perfect attempt, but there is a toggle switch on there that you can toggle on bond and non-bond projects, and they're listed as transportation, parks, affordable housing, building construction, water, and I think maybe other category there. So I would hesitate to say that that's our 100% comprehensive list, but we are trying to update that as much as we can.
And we can bring that comprehensive list to you, but that's going to, if you're willing to sit through that list, we can do that for sure.
We like to talk about projects.
We like to talk about projects.
Thank you.
We reached that nobody else is jumping up to talk. So the next step in this budgeting process we talked about is the manager's going to bring the budget to us. So there were a couple outstanding items. I know everyone's tired and we got to have a little break before we go into council, but there were a couple outstanding items that I think we're going to need to let the manager know about so you can put together the manager's budget. I think we talked about reparations and whether or not to create a line item for reparations and what a recommendation would be around that. And we had a pretty robust discussion around reimagining public safety and well, we talked about reparations. And then finally, I wanted to bring up, and maybe others are interested in this too, my concerns around staff pay. I'm glad to see the 4% included, and I understand the rationale behind 2.5% for employees hired in the year 2022. I am concerned again about keeping those wages higher and trying to match our counterparts as well. So I would be interested in looking at pushing that some more to the extent we can. I think you told us last time 1% is the equivalent of $740,000 if that's an across the board. I mean, maybe it would be appropriate to split it out. I don't know if you say, okay, everyone who gets paid less than 75,000 gets, I don't know how, I don't want to micromanage it because I know then we create problems like compression issues, but I would be interested in exploring a more aggressive wage support for staff. So a couple, and maybe somebody else has another item out there, but those are the things I kind of heard.
I would support that as long as we do end up with the breakout like we've seen before, and addressing making sure we're in compliance with our living wage policy once we get some more clarity on that.
Can I just ask a question? Could you just bring back what our policy actually is? Is it not I mean, what our policy actually is, versus is it in compliance with just economics? I don't think it actually is.
I'm going to ask Shannon to come up.
So again, Shannon Barrett, HR Director. So if I understand, you're asking about a policy related to the living wage specifically. And we don't actually have a policy related to living wage. As I understand it, it has been through resolution by council that we have, agreed to maintain a living wage. And I cannot remember off the top of my head, but I'm not sure when the last time that was done. So we don't actually have a policy that speaks to maintaining the living wage.
It may be that we did it kind of year by year, and we renewed it as we could with the funding, given the funding issues.
That's correct.
I would also feel that we really need to address the culture here in the city of Asheville. I've heard a lot of different things from different people about, of course, wages are important, but more important is a comfortable workplace, and feeling comfortable, feeling valued, feeling like you're treated right. And like I said, I've heard a lot of complaints about that. So I think is there any kind of policy we have toward ethical, culture or ethical training or whatever to ensure that we get this? Because I can tell you, I've been with, a couple of companies before, and culture and how well the people are treated actually weighs more, is more valuable sometimes than wages. So as we sit here and talk about increasing wages to be competitive, we really need to look at improving our culture and relationships within our departments.
I just want to share that at our retreat, we heard from our 17 department head input that they were a list of words, and I believe the top 2 were overwhelmed and exhausted. I'm just kind of curious how that plays into this conversation. Is it raises? Is it more personnel? Are we about to lose 50 people to the county? Like, where are we? I do want to acknowledge that I understand staff are overwhelmed and exhausted.
Yeah, we have guiding principles for the organization. And the things that you mentioned in terms of being ethical and being fair and treating our employees with the ultimate respect. Does everybody get, from an employee perspective, everything that they may desire or want as it relates to wages or whatever those requests may be? Probably not, but it is definitely a value that we have, and over the past several years, it has been around employee retention. And a lot of that is through, obviously, you all adopted the compensation plan. I mean, we are making steady progress, but do we have a mountain to climb? Absolutely right now, especially with the competition that we have from other organizations, local government, private sector, nonprofits, employees
You're
have.
still dealing on the compensation issue. I'm not really concerned about the compensation issue. I'm concerned about treatment. And I will tell you, I've heard it from numerous people, that it's not really the staff, it's just within certain organizations, within the company itself, who actually feel that they are not treated fairly and they leave. And so, and it's not always about the money. And I mean, I think that is something we really need to work on here in the city. And we cannot keep ignoring that it does not occur, and it is not occurring. I don't want to give you specific examples, but I could. But I think it is something that we really need to look hard at.
Well, I'll take that feedback, take it back to the management team, because it would be, of our highest concern. But we, as I said, we value our employees. We try to have equitable treatment. But again, do we fall short sometimes? Absolutely, we do. We're human.
And
But
I'll
I
be even
think
more
overall,
specific.
we're a good organization to work for.
And I'll be even more specific in support of Sandra's position. I've heard from several Black women in particular, a number who have left working for the city, that there have been issues, but those issues not only occur within the city itself, but throughout our city. So I just want to highlight that, and maybe that's something that the equity department can pay particularly close attention to.
Council, we had a discussion earlier about, so on pay raises, are we satisfied with the proposed pay raises here? If so, that's where we're at. Do we want to ask, I mean, you kind of brought up another issue, which is more pay the answer, or is it more FTEs, more positions to help support exhausted staff who feel overwhelmed? I mean, this is a management issue, so, I mean, I would defer to the recommendation of the manager whether, what I would just say is I'm interested in doing the maximum we can with this budget to support staff and support staff retention and, workplace satisfaction is, whatever those driving factors are, however, this council can help address that. I would like to see that in this budget. If this is it, if this, what we've seen today is the maximum we can allocate within the confines of this budget, then that's the answer. But if there's more we could do. Yep.
Okay, unless this council is willing to take some things off the list of requests that we saw today, or the council is willing to raise taxes, I don't really see that. I mean, again, then council needs to, nod and say, we don't want X, Y, and Z, which is what Taylor laid out here. I mean, I guess it is a zero-sum game. And, I appreciate it, and I'm supportive. I'm also very supportive of staff. I'm very concerned that a 4% raise isn't going to cut it when we look at inflation, et cetera. But on the other hand, we have to be willing to go through these examples of new funding requests and say, we can't do that this year.
No, I mean, I understand that. I understand the math.
Well,
but what I'm saying.
It's not fair to staff to, act like this is just a never-ending bucket and then, and then support everything that's on the list for new funding requests. I mean, unless council nods right now and says, we want a tax increase.
So Gwen, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying to management, you have given us this selection, this menu of funding requests. We get funding requests from departments every year that don't end up getting funded. There is a decision made at a management level not to fund them. So if the request today is to fund all of the things that have been presented to us in lieu of other things, then that's the decision. I don't want to micromanage the management in that. What I'm saying is if there is a way if you all go back to the drawing board and you say, okay, we've got these funding requests, but you know what we'd rather have this year? We'd rather put this and this off, and we'd rather see a salary increase. That's all I'm saying. I don't want anyone to say, well, thanks for that salary increase, but now we don't have new computer software. That is not my intention. So, I'm only saying that if, I also don't want staff to feel like, well, council, drew the limit at 4%, and that's what we're stuck with. So I'm offering the flexibility to come back with a recommendation that best suits the needs of staff. And I assume that's what will happen anyway, but I'm just merely, I understand. I don't want to go through and say, well, I value this or I don't value that,
Well,
because I really don't know enough about each of these line item requests from the departments to be able to say, and we just don't as a council, obviously.
Well, but to a certain degree, isn't that what these work sessions are intended to be? Aren't they intended to be that we look through these lists and we say, okay, I'm good with the 6 of them and not these 4, and what I want to use that extra 4 that I took off the list that weren't priorities this year, I want to use it for that. I thought that's kind of what the work sessions are for. It's, and to just generically throw that out there, I think we have an obligation to tell staff, that with these new funding requests, that here's our priorities, here's our top things, and if there are things that are not on the top of our list, then we would prefer that go back to salaries. But to just, I assume they haven't just arbitrarily thrown a bunch of numbers out here and said.
No, but they're only examples. Deborah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand we give some general feedback, especially if they're new initiatives that we may or may not support. But you're just giving us examples of the kinds of things that have been requested, and we don't even have the full picture from this presentation.
That is correct. Quite frankly, what we were trying to provide you all with is the stress and strain on the budget without looking at an additional source of revenue. That we know we have salary compensation issues. You all have said we have cultural issues as well. And we also wanted to show that, and we haven't even, calculated all of the departmental requests, but just an example, we've got this amount of money, we've got just an example of this amount of requests, and this is going to be a tough struggle for us. And this was to hear a little bit about add more money for reparations in terms of your priorities. Those are the things, and I think we got that kind of input today.
Sort of like the ARP funding, we just sort of finished, right? Sort of,
Yeah.
just keep on, yeah.
We just keep on
Yeah, okay.
You're helping
whittling down.
And I think you're helping signal to us that the needs are great, and don't go shopping,
Please don't go shopping.
Right, don't go shopping but so I hear that loud and clear.
But we will respond to the challenge. We'll come back with recommendations, and I think we hear somewhat of the direction. I think we also heard, Gwen, from you that the outreach position may not be one that you personally feel is
Again,
appropriate.
I guess what I would ask between now and when the manager's budget comes back, I think realistically, what we have to ask, we've been given these examples. I'm assuming that there's probably 100 examples that didn't hit this presentation.
Yeah, we
And
tried to take the top.
Right. And
Put the
so
rest of them to do it
what
in
I'm just
priority order.
suggesting is between now and when you come forward, individual council members need to reach out to you and say, these are my priorities. These are the things that I would be willing to take off the table if I want compensation to increase. Or, I don't know, come up with something else that, they've found. But it just doesn't seem fair to just, keep saying, well, we want more, but we're not willing to take anything off the table. I mean, this is our job to help, to give guidance, and not just, we want more.
You want the add and delete exercise.
Right, I want add and delete. I think that's what is only fair to give you feedback on. You've clearly brought forward what you consider the top funding requests. And so now, between now and the manager's budget, then I think we, as individual council members, have an obligation to give that feedback to you.
I agree. I mean, this is the hard job we signed up for. I would appreciate if you all are coming back with a personnel recommendation that has more information, if there's anything that could be added to it that speaks to the exhaustion and stuff, so it's not just, will a raise, simple. I guess I don't want to micromanage it all. I just am curious if you, in that exercise of finding the 10 words exhausted and overwhelmed, if there was more information gathered that might help them with morale.
Do you want that in the context of the budget?
I don't necessarily want it to be presented to us. I'm just hoping that's the angle at which some of this reconfiguring might come from, that it's not perhaps just a wage issue. Like, what is it? Is it more FTEs or not? I'm assuming she's probably doing that. I'm just encouraging it.
Any other feedback for?
I guess just one thing. So this is our last work session, right? So the next thing we'll see on budget is voting on it, but then there's this Tpdf process that's going to be layered in. So I'm not sure how, I guess this is just be on our own reconnaissance. We'll meet with you if needed. And
Well, I have got to say that we are only going to hear once from the public on engagement on this budget, and it's always at the end after we're supposed to give our nods. And I just got to say that we're not just voting on the budget. We have to hear from the public on this. Just adding that in.
Sure, that will, I assume that night, yeah. I guess I'm just a little thrown off by the timeline of the potential Tpdf, because what if we do apply for something that does
We
bring
are
in
going
2
to
million?
provide that to you next
Yeah,
week,
and-
May 10th.
Right, so.
So all together, okay.
Yeah, but don't get too excited, because it's really not gonna, it's not gonna.
Well, if
shift-
1% is $750,000 and we end up.
But TPDF is one-time capital.
I know.
And that, we're talking about salaries, so,
Cup and ball game, yeah.
yeah, well, okay, so, yeah, I mean, the TPDF, we're talking about the Tourism Product Development Fund, which the application cycle that's about to happen is under the current legislation, which can only be used for capital, that has this crossover relationship to tourism. So that list is going to look like, the golf course, and things that fit. So, and it's going to impact the capital budget, not the,
So
not the ongoing. not-
Memorial, maybe not. I'm just looking at all our pools of funds.
Not Memorial.
Certainly not.
Absolutely not Memorial, because the direction we're going in with Memorial is a neighborhood park.
Instead of,
So it won't qualify for TPDF funding the way it's visioned. But, I mean, that's not to say it's not going to be significant and very helpful, but it will only impact the capital budget. Anything? We need a little break here before we go back. All right, so okay. We're adjourned for time, yeah.